All right. Cheri Jamison is back. Wow. Yes. Yay. Cheri, as I'm sure you all know, has been with us on numerous occasions, mostly, well, not completely, but she sang quite a bit at different places where we've been. But Cheri would like to let you know that she is much more than that. And here's some things that she's been doing and up to that are pretty amazing. I just looked at her website on Make Peace with Your Religious Past, and listened to her introduction of it, and it's amazing. So I really suggest you get out there and listen to that. Watch her too. And then, so she's been in Unity online radio shows and published Unity booklets. And also, I didn't know this about Science of Mind magazine, Cheri, so that's great too. And she's been facilitating and working on Make Peace with Your Religious Past for a good long while now. And that's the website down there. So, Cheri, welcome back. It's great to see you.
Thank you. It is a pleasure to be back with you all. Thank you again for your support, and I'm grateful I get to be with you again. So yes, as Jeff shared, most of you know me as a singer, and I've feel like I am in this place of really expanding and sharing more about who I am. And so today I want to share a project that's really close to my heart. And I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with you. The topic for today, healing religious triggers. And this is really just a start of the conversation, because it is, how can I say, it's a complex topic, right? And my real intention is to kind of normalize this experience and give you some tools. So I recently was the keynote speaker for the June 2023 Unity Convention. And that's a gathering I had over 250 Unity leaders in the workshop that I gave on this topic. So I'm going to give you like a really, really shortened version of it to give you a little bit of context, and also hopefully some really practical tools to help you when you feel like you're getting triggered by religious content. And I'll share more about that. Okay. Oops. So my name is Cheri Jamison. Most of you know me as a singer, but what you might not know about me is that I grew up in New Thought and Self-Realization Fellowship. Also, the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. So I'm looking at the gallery view here, just by a quick raise of hands or digital hands, how many of you came to this sort of your personal spiritual path right now from a different tradition? You grew up in a different tradition than what you are experiencing now. Yeah, so that's basically 100%, maybe 99% of folks here. And I feel like that is a pretty common thing for these traditions. And so, so I feel like I'm unique in a sense. And I get a lot of people saying, oh, wow, so you're so lucky to have grown up in this tradition. And one of the things I want to share is that it's not always easy. So I grew up in New Thought and Self-Realization Fellowship. What you may not know about me is that I almost became a nun in the SRF monastic order. And when I was in my mid-20s, I went through a very painful faith deconstruction around my beliefs in Self-Realization Fellowship. And this was something that was really the inspiration for this program that I created. And want to share this because there's a misconception, I think, that this only happens to people in traditional Christian communities. And I don't have time to go into a lot of my story, but basically I went to New Thought Sunday school. I got really involved with Self-Realization Fellowship when my mom started going more deeply into it when I was 12 years old. I went to all their camps. And by the time I graduated college, I was really in it, like 100%. Chose my college because I wanted to be closer to the SRF communities in the Southern California area. That's when I was working at the SRF headquarters, and I was doing that because I was checking out the lifestyle of being a nun. And it was about 2008 when, you know, the recession hit, and there were many sort of events and thoughts that preceded sort of this deconstruction experience, and I'll talk a little more about what that is soon, that made me realize that it's just that it wasn't fitting for me anymore. And it was really hard because I had built my entire persona around being an SRF devotee or follower of the path. And everything that all the context of my whole worldview was centered around this faith, this tradition. So it took about 6 years for me to be like fully honest with myself that this was not working out. And I was sort of in this limbo. It's very uncomfortable. I was being very, very hard on myself. And it was almost like emotionally torturous to be going through that identity crisis, really. And I decided at one point that enough was enough. I didn't want, like, spirituality in my own inner life was more important to me than the pain I was feeling. And I said, I'm going to do everything that I can to work through this and get support so that I can reclaim my inner life for myself. I want this to work. I don't want to feel this limbo anymore. So that is when I got support. I went back to my alma mater where I studied spiritual psychology for my master's degree program. And when I audited, this was after I already graduated. So I went back, audited, and had this focus as I went through the second year of the program again. And that is what became kind of the baseline of my online program called Make Peace with Your Religious Past. So religious triggers. Religious triggers, you know, it's a topic that I brought forward to this community because, as we saw earlier, the vast majority of folks in this tradition are transplants. And I don't think it's something that we acknowledge enough, that the things that we were brought up with are different from the things that we are studying now and believing now. And so your religious past really colors how you experience new concepts that you're learning. And it's almost as if, like, the people coming into your community are wearing protective colored goggles or headphones with built-in translation. So even if you think you're talking about the same thing, but it's being filtered through entirely unique experiences. So the way I like to describe religious triggers is kind of like a knotted up ball of yarn inside of you. And it feels like everything is all kind of knotted up together, right? And it hurts when things get triggered. It's like these little hooks inside of you that when you hear a word or a phrase or a quote from any number of holy texts, that may trigger you or upset your peace. So I define a religious trigger as anything of a religious nature, of a religious content that disturbs your peace. So how do you know if your peace is disturbed? It's if you can complete the phrase, I am upset because blank. I am upset because blank. And that says, okay, I've got a trigger going on. that just means it's not something that you have to judge. It's like just noticing your emotions, right? And if you get upset, it's like, I'm upset because that quote or that person behaved a certain way that I don't agree with, then you have a religious trigger going on, and there are tools you can use to help with it. And that's what I want to talk to you about today. Very practical. So the thing about coming from other religious paths is that even if you leave a religion or change paths, the religious triggers and conditioning that you have still remain inside of you. If you haven't addressed it, it just goes unconscious, it goes underground. And there's obviously like a spectrum of trigger intensity, right? Some people don't feel bothered at all. Some people are neutral most of the time, whereas others might, like myself, when I was going through my own questioning, it's doubt, disillusionment, and at its most extreme intensity, something that particularly the Western Christian traditions call deconstruction. And this is a very common experience. There are entire online communities about like ex-evangelical, ex-Mormon, recovering Catholics, if you've heard some of these things, people describe themselves as. So I want to focus a little bit on this, the most intense version of deconstruction. And what is deconstruction? Well, at its definition, it really just means taking the time to look at the faith in which you were brought up in, or no faith. It might be a secular belief system, but those of us who have grown up in the West, it's pervasive in our culture, right? You can't really live your life without experiencing some of it. So what is deconstruction? It is looking at the faith and the conditioning, the beliefs in which you were raised, to really just introspect around the things that serve you and the things that don't. And ideally, let go of the things that don't work for you and find things that do. However, that is a very nice way of putting it. That might be sort of the textbook definition of it, but it's actually a very emotional experience. So why does deconstruction happen? Oftentimes, people actually start looking more deeply into their church history. Some people endure trauma or abuse by spiritual authority figures. Maybe they were told their sexuality was bad. There are inconsistencies or hypocrisies in the teachings. Sometimes societal traumas will kick it off. It's like, if this bad thing can happen, how does a God, it doesn't line up with their concept of God, right? So it starts that questioning process. Maybe they're tired of feeling less than as a woman. Maybe they've been told they've been a sinner their entire life, or they never really felt aligned in the first place with that tradition. And my favorite is that some people choose into it as a conscious choice because they wanted to. So the emotional experience of deconstruction, though, can feel like your entire world is falling apart. It starts with these triggers, the things in your worldview just aren't really working anymore. And you start questioning, it's like, oh my God, what is happening? And then it's like, so someone that I interviewed on my podcast once described deconstruction like flicking over the first domino and seeing your entire world kind of fall over, and it's completely out of your control until all the pieces are down. And then you can go and like pick things up and reorder it. And I thought that was quite a visual way of describing it. A deeply challenging emotional experience. And a lot of this has to do with your internal environment, right? This is sort of a representation of how I felt when I was going through my deconstruction. It was just like a constant, invisible, but very real internal experience. So common reactions when someone is going through a deconstruction experience is to pretend it's not happening. Sometimes they will take a break from whatever church or spiritual community they're trying to work through their stuff with. Maybe they'll try to fix it, or they'll try to fix themselves. They'll try something else to replace it, or they will just say, you know what, I don't need this, I'm going to leave it completely. So becoming aware of your religious triggers and conditioning, being mindful of your triggers and learning new habits does take time. It can be really messy, nuanced, complex, and maybe a lifelong adjustment. But really, at the end of the day, it's about your inner life. And you could say your inner life is your spiritual life. This is really the focus of, I think, all spiritual paths at the end of the day. It's like, you want to feel good inside of yourself. You want to feel connected, right? And like there's a meaningfulness there. And so religious triggers are not really about religion. It's about your inner life. And giving yourself permission to define that for yourself, regardless of what any religious tradition tells you it should be. Because if that religious tradition and what it says it should look like doesn't work for you, then you don't, like, there's so many, it's like, I think people try to shoot for standards. I certainly did this, like shoot for standards that don't really make sense to them, or they're doing it because they feel like that, they want to do it right. And at the end of the day, it causes more stress and tension than is really healthy. And so learning to trust yourself, learning to work with your human nature, experimenting to find what works for you, to get to that point where you feel like your inner life is healthy and connected and meaningful, is what I define as a success. So what can you do if you feel triggered? So one of the key points I want to share with you that's really practical when you're feeling triggered is that relationships are an entryway. It's not the only entryway, but I found this in all of my work to be the most helpful. That most religious triggers can be sorted into 5 main relationship categories, but there's overlap. So what do I mean by relationships here? You remember the knotted up ball of yarn? So that can feel really overwhelming. And so by sort of separating it out, and if you can ask yourself, okay, what relationship category does this sort of trigger fall into? Addressing it in its proper place helps it feel less overwhelming. It moves it from feeling impossible to possible. And the premise behind this is that relationships mostly happen within you. So that's where you have the most dominion. So if you think about a relationship, say with your spouse or a friend, that, yes, there is that other person, but most of your relationship with them happens because of like how you feel about your emotions, what you're thinking about them. And that is an inner aspect of the relationship. And so with God or spirit or a religious figure or a spiritual authority figure, like that is a purely inner relationship. You think so. Very quickly, I'm going to open this up to gallery view again. How many of you feel like you have a personal relationship with spirit? Yes. Yeah. So good. Yeah. So that is a real relationship. That is a real and valid relationship. So the 5 relationship categories that I define for, let me go back here, to sort of put these triggers into are God or higher power, kind of that concept and that relationship. Your relationship to your family. This might be a family of origin or chosen families, people who are close to you. authority figures or teachers, the community in which you participate or other followers of that religious tradition, or something about the teachings and the worldview that that religious tradition represents. And kind of as a bonus, like all of this is happening within you. So it's your relationship with yourself. So if you think about a religious trigger, let's say, for example, so one of the triggers that I worked with was feeling like my family would abandon me if I left the self-realization fellowship path. And part of that, so if I thought about if that was a fear that I had, or that it was a fear I was working with at the time, that really, if I were to, it was all kind of caught up. It felt like there was a lot of intertwining things, right? But if I took the time to separate it out, which I did in my process, it's like, okay, this obviously falls into the relationship of family, but it also has to do with the teachings, because the underlying fear was that if you left the path, then you were going to be lost. And it wasn't like you're going to hell, but you'll be lost for lifetimes kind of thing. So I want you to play with that in this, when the next time you feel triggered is to just ask yourself, okay, think about these 5 relationship categories, and sort of a nice acronym is GFACT: God, family, authority figures, community, and teachings. And just see, okay, if I can separate that out and just focus in on my personal development work on that one area, then how does that change? Does that make it feel less overwhelming? So that is, that's the one key that I want to share with you today. I know there's a lot that I go into a lot more detail in my full program, Make Peace with Your Religious Past, which is at religionofOrigin.com. But this is a key area of the process to help start working through religious triggers. Thank you. All right, so we are going to just take a moment to breathe, and go into meditation. Close your eyes, take a deep breath. And I want you to just tune into that inner space inside of you that signifies your own personal inner life. That place of peace inside, that sanctuary where your heart feels safe. And ask yourself, what do I want? What do I want for my inner life? Do I feel happy with that experience inside of me? Or are there places to grow? Now, we all know that inside, in meditation, we can tap into that place inside of us that is of deep peace. But it doesn't always feel available all the time. Maybe there are thoughts that get in the way. Maybe there are fears, judgments that get in the way of you feeling that peace, that connection. And maybe that's religious triggers. Maybe it's something someone told you about yourself, something that a spiritual authority figure or a parent said about you, or that you made something mean about yourself when you received that message. So I want you to just give yourself permission right now in the silence to pay attention to the part of you that received that information, whatever age you were at the time. And give yourself permission to let it go. To send love back in time to who you were, whatever age you were at the time when you heard that message. Send that love, surround that younger part of you with light, with understanding, with compassion. Just notice how it feels to receive that love and understanding. To have the pain or misunderstanding acknowledged. Maybe there's a message you want to give that younger part of yourself. A message of encouragement. And in that place, inside of you, with loving, say goodbye to that younger part of yourself. And come back into your present space. And give yourself loving, give yourself permission to reclaim your inner life, whatever that looks like for you. That you get to reclaim it every single day because it's yours. It's your inner life. There's no one else that experiences it but you. Really feel what that feels like to claim it, to own it, to feel empowered, to change it if you want to, or just go more deeply into what's working for you right now. And thank yourself for all the inner work that you've done throughout the years to bring you to this moment, to bring you to this time and place where you found something that works better for you than it has in the past. That you are the kind of person that grows and changes. Just feel that gratitude and love. And know that no matter what your past story is, that you can send that story love and release it. And in that recognition, to symbolize that, I want to share with you a song by someone that you know in this community as well. The very talented John Laux. Got to have the closing note there. Thank you.
It's true. But you got to sing. That was great. Thank you. Wow. What a journey you took us on there, and I don't know that personally. I had a religious experience at my school that I thought was great, and it was Quakers, and I continue to think it was great. So, but I also hear from many, many people how hypocritical and how torn people are with Catholicism in particular, but not exclusively. So what a sort of pit to pull yourself out of. I understand how difficult that can be. So, wow, thank you so much for that.
Thank you.
Will resonate with us for a long time.
Thank you. And there are tools available. I just want to mention again, that I have an online program called Make Peace with Your Religious Past at religionoforigin.com. And that guides you step by step through addressing the messages that you received, working through the emotional pain, and reclaiming your inner life. There's also a wonderful book called Loyalty to Your Soul by Drs. Ron and Mary Holnick that go into a lot of depth about how you can work your inner process and do that emotional work as well, with some really amazing context that I include in my program as well. So I encourage you to check that out and use me as a resource if that's something you or someone you know is dealing with. Thank you.